Oh, good afternoon, everyone. So I want to welcome Reggie to the chat, and we've got Mushu with Reggie as well. So thanks for having this opportunity, mate, for a chat about Movember and men's health. I was actually just talking to your better half. So for those that don't know, Reggie is going to be a first-time parent. So he's expecting either it's a couple of months to go now. She's what, 7 months
Yeah,
pregnant? Yeah, yeah.
that's it. Sounds about right.
And you're having a girl. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. What you expecting, what you wanted.
Well, it's the weirdest thing. Like, I actually, for some reason, I really thought it was gonna be a boy.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
healthy
I
kids are
think.
good kids, right?
Oh, that's it. And I knew when I had my boys. So my boys are only a year apart. So between me and both my boys, it's less
Mm.
than our birthdays are within a month. So
Okay.
and they're only just a year and 13 days apart. So they're pretty close in age. So and I knew I was having boys. I just knew it. I know
Mm.
you just get that sense. And
Yeah.
I knew. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as they're healthy, who really
Yeah.
cares? As long as they're healthy, that's the main thing. So
Can't ask
and
for it.
yeah, yeah. It's and it's good having this opportunity to chat. So I know when we're talking about mental health and men's health in
Mm.
particular, there's always a stigma behind men's health, and that can be from all sorts of things. It can be age related, it can be just how it is perceived in the community. Now, I had a good chat with one of my friends who's Japanese and got a bit of an insight in how mental health is perceived in her culture.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to kind of get a little bit of an insight on what you've experienced because you're born Japanese, but you were lived in Thailand for a fair bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the perception with mental health when it comes to that community?
I think it's a really interesting subject, to be honest, in general, with I think it started to change quite a lot in the last decade, maybe. But back when I was in school, Japan was definitely closed off about whole mental health, especially for men. It's a lot of like, your man, you deal with it
Yeah.
type of deal. Thailand's a little bit more open, but even then, it's a little bit tricky. And this you can look at the statistic of it, especially with a lot of Asian countries, including Korea as well. The suicide rate for men in regard to mental health is pretty high because they don't really have the sort of safe place. That being said, it is improving, but I think it need to get better.
Yeah.
Because I think the biggest exposure of my understanding of mental health and acceptance of my anxiety and everything was pretty much when I was with Holly. And I think that's when I started to really break it down and work alongside with it. Because quite honestly, when I got together with Holly in the beginning, obviously got the bipolar depression and everything. I didn't quite understand it and I couldn't really accept it until like more into our relationship. And that's just like comes down to lack of knowledge and exposure and acceptance in Asian culture, I think.
Yeah. How did and that's a good thing to be honest about because I know a lot of people wouldn't be really honest about that and sometimes it might frighten people away when they're not exposed to that. But then when they're with
Mm,
somebody who is exposed to that, you're thinking, oh, what the hell? What's going on here? What do I do?
mm.
Is it easy for me to just go, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this and move on? Or do you stay and do you support your partner going through that? And
Yeah.
without having that understanding and knowledge from the start, that would be pretty hard, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's really important that like whatever is going through in sort of anxiety or depression or any of these sort of things, it's need to be discussed and it should be open to. Otherwise, like I think it's lack of connection that leads to that sort of the result of like self harm and everything. And I think
Mm.
if there was more acceptance in society in any of like well that's in like a lot of it in Asia, then I think it'd be less sort of what those incident with suicide and self harm. I would say.
Yeah, I've always had this perception, and tell me if I'm wrong. Like when you're comparing Japan to Thailand, for example, I
Mm.
feel like Japan will be a little bit more closed off towards it.
Yeah, I would say so. Japan's a lot more closed off.
Yeah, and I think Thailand, like I've visited Thailand many times, and I love the country,
Mm.
and I think they're a bit more um, open, a little bit more open towards it. There's obviously a lot of
Yeah,
acceptance
I agree with that.
yeah, and there's a lot of acceptance to lady boys and stuff like that within the community.
Mm. Mm.
It's just a part of the culture, and then they're accepted as
Yeah,
far as
no, I agree.
I've got that understanding that they have.
Mm.
You would think that the mental health side of things will be accepted. I know, am I wrong on that?
I think it's probably is more, but that being said, I have seen people with self harm in Thailand, so I would assume it's still a little bit of work in progress.
Yeah,
I'll say.
yeah, yeah. When did you last stop living in Thailand?
I think I left Thailand like properly around 18, and that was over in New Zealand for a little while, in Canada, and obviously here.
Yeah,
And I was over in the States for a little bit too, but like not that long.
yeah,
But I got opportunity to travel around a lot. Like I've been to Egypt and Turkey and everything,
yeah,
and it's really really interesting to be exposed to these different cultures, the different way of acceptance. Um, yeah,
yeah. And then and it's interesting that you mentioned about your travel, because I'm thinking when you're going to these different countries, being a
mm,
Japanese man,
mm,
even though that you're only there till you're 8 years old, but it's still probably enough to understand the culture quite well. What was the feeling that you got when you were traveling in those different countries? Was there any exposure to mental health from your eyes, from a like if you're new in Canada, for example, a Japanese man in Canada looking at mental health in that country?
I think was really interesting. I suppose. Again, like I can see more acceptance in the country. In comparison to Japan.
Yeah,
But I don't know, like for some reason, like I think when I was in during that period, I'm like I must have gone through a really depressive state where I don't really remember clearly what I was doing. I just like I was almost in a survival mode
yeah,
when I was in Canada
yeah,
because it was pretty tough. I
yeah,
think
right.
back at that time I was by myself in New Zealand and my brother was there. And that was probably Canada was probably the first place I knew like my parents are not here. I don't know anyone. My brother's not here.
Mm,
So that was a bit tricky, I'll say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So having that support there where
Mm.
you didn't have any family to fall back on.
No, I didn't. I just pretty much like packed up my bag and just kind of go type of deal when I was at least for Canada. In New
Yeah,
Zealand, my brother was there, so even though I might not be best buddy with my brother, it's
yeah.
I still had family.
Yeah, and that's it. And I was having a chat with a friend of mine yesterday. He's only 22. He's
Mm,
based here in Cairns, and he went down to the Gold Coast after he graduated, and
mm,
he had no family or support there at all. And he was actually he lived up in the Tablelands in Cairns. So
yep,
going from the Tablelands to the Gold Coast, it's just
it's a big change.
it's massive. It's going from one extreme to the other,
Mm,
like big time. I know when I was talking to my friends who's Japanese, the the support network for a Japanese man to have, and I think it's probably a little bit different for you because you left there when you were 8. So
mm,
when you're thinking, and it's probably more centered around Thailand actually, because you're probably there when you're growing up in your teens, stuff like that. What was life
Yeah.
there like when you were growing up? I don't think. Well, I could be totally wrong, and tell me if I am wrong. But like the support is there? I know with schools here that they do focus a lot on mental health.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think there would have been much in the way when you were growing up there about mental health.
Weirdly, actually, no.
No.
No, I don't think so. Cause like, yeah, no, I don't remember having to go through any particular mental health as a sort of a thing. That being said, there was a big deal that came in when I was around year 10, when we had one of our friends committed suicide, and then that's when they started to have a little bit more openness about things.
Yeah.
But till then, I was like, not so much.
Nothing. Yeah, and unfortunately, it takes something like that for people to action,
Mm,
which is which is
unfortunate.
oh, it's very unfortunate. Yeah, I've lost friends to suicide, and it's never a good place to be in. And it was interesting that we had something happen at our place just a couple of
Mm,
nights ago. Um, it was without going into too much detail, but it was uh, a friend of mine, a friend of my son's, who was going through an episode, and
mm,
and he came over, and there was support for him while he was
yeah,
here. Um, and the way that my son dealt with it, because his friend wanted to see him, but there was other aspects involved as well. There was some support here for him, external support, but he wanted to see my son. And the way that
mm,
my son dealt with that, and I'm not just saying that 'cause he's my kid, but he treated it with a lot of maturity. Like, he dealt with it level headedly. He's talking to him and saying, no, it's going to be okay. What are you doing? Stuff like this, just listening to his conversation, because
yeah,
his mate wasn't in a good spot at the time. And it was all very unexpected, and it just happens in a space of 5 minutes. So, but the way he dealt with that,
yeah.
he treated it with a lot of respect and maturity. So, and that's something that I try and instill with my kids. They're at that age where they're young men. They're they've gone through a stage when they're awkward teens and stuff like that, and trying to find themselves, what they want to do. But there is still that support behind them, and that's a segue onto for yourself. Becoming a
Mm,
dad for the first time. Well, I'm assuming it's the first time, but it's that change within your life. How do you think? And I've mentioned this to Holly. Obviously, you're having a girl, so um,
mhm.
and and we did. I'm pretty sure I did mention that before. And it's how do you think what life is at the moment when it comes to mental health? When you're looking at 15 years, 10, 15 years down the track, what support, if anything, would you think there would be for your daughter if she was going through something like that?
Well, I'm like, well, I genuinely don't know how long this whole "Are You Okay" program
Yeah,
is going on, but that's something big, obviously, in Australia. That's what I've noticed, and there's a lot of like, even on the TV, you can see the ads on mental health and everything, which that didn't happen until for the decade, I think.
yeah,
And in that sense, I think it's improving a lot. And I think by the time that she's in her teens, I think a lot of generations changed where it's all becomes a norm of having that sort
yeah.
of network. But maybe that's just me being hopeful.
Yeah,
But that being said, it's about having a strong communication with the family, right? I guess.
well, that's it. Yeah, having that connection, having that yeah, having that strong bond and having that connection with family,
Mm.
can definitely help. You know, I know it's not the same for everybody. Everybody's going through a lot of different circumstances in their life,
Yeah, great.
but having, you know, when I was growing up, there was nothing around it, nothing around mental health. When I spoke for someone for the first time, that was in 1995, and then
Mm.
and even then, that was just a once-off thing. Wasn't even sure how that conversation was going to happen. I honestly don't even know how I got a hold of this guy. I think I just looked in the bloody yellow pages and found somebody to
Mm.
talk to. Because at that time it wasn't a good spot to be in. And then when we're looking at the um, the generational shift,
Mm.
so you know I'm 51, my kids are 21 and 22. By the time that they're my age and they're going to have children of their own, I want
Mm.
to make sure that they're installing these practices. Like I know with my boys, my eldest is down in Brisbane,
Mm.
and there's definitely a lot of um, support behind people who suffer from mental health down there. But
Yeah.
his experience, it's a lot within his age group that is suffering
Mm.
the most. So that's what we're trying to do, and the conversations that I've been having with people, it's been across the board. You know, different ages, different ethnic groups. You know, gay, straight, trans, bi, whatever, old, young, male, female. I don't care. It's
Mm.
getting that different group dynamic to talk about their experiences and what they've experienced in their life. And I know when it comes to being a father for the first time, it's going to be a challenge for sure. And it's going to, you know, if you're installing these practices on good mental health at this age,
Mm.
then that's going to the bring it down to the children of, you know, who are growing up, you know, for your child, for their generation. You know, my boys are at that age when, you know, it's not going to be, well, don't know yet, but it might be a little bit while before I become a grandfather. But I know
Mm.
what I've installed in them, they're going to put onto their children. And I hope
Mm.
it's just going to move forward, because I think a lot of conversations around mental health is definitely a generational thing. You know, you talk
Yeah.
to someone who's 60, 70, 80 years old, and everyone said the same thing. You know, they kind of just ignore it, they sweep it under the rug, they find it as a weakness when they're talking about
Mm.
their own mental health.
Mm.
Whether that's the same within the Asian community, I'm not sure. From what I've gathered from conversations, I think it is. I think it's kind of a bit of a taboo subject. Is that fair enough in
Yeah,
saying
it
that?
is. Like, quite honestly, like, how I've learned to deal with my mental health and anxiety, quite honestly, is something I picked up later in my life. It
Yeah,
wasn't something that I really learned per se when I was in my 20s. Probably I gained more like late 20s, I think, is I would say, which kind of aligned with when I got with Holly. And I
yeah,
think that was the biggest thing. Like, she being with her opened up my idea about these mental health and things, and I was like, okay, like, okay, I didn't know how to handle it, but I'm starting to accept it. When I start accepting it, that's when I can start learning a little bit more. Took me a little while, not gonna lie.
yeah. No, and that's mate. I appreciate the honesty. You know, it wouldn't be easy for someone who hasn't experienced it necessarily in their life to then have it in their life with somebody that they care for. And
Mm.
you know, and it's like, you know, what do I do in that situation? Do I accept it, or do I reject it basically and just, you know,
Yeah.
get away from it? It definitely shows that you're a better man to accept that, and you know, and accept those flaws for that person who you care for and love.
I think it just was it must have been my maturity. It took me a little while, but I think when I was with her and around the time, I think I must be in a good spot where I was able to accept and willing to say like, okay, well, I have no idea what I'm dealing with,
Yeah.
but it's something that I want to work through, and then it's important for me, and yeah, no,
Well, that's
I'm
it.
glad
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, yeah. It's important for your uh own understanding and of your own self worth and understanding of what people are going through, and
Mm,
whether that's in your personal life, whether that's in your work life. You know, you have that understanding on how to accept people for their flaws and
yeah.
and it makes you a better person for it, I believe.
Mm,
So, yeah. All right, man. Well, that's a good insight onto on what you've had a chat about. I know it's only brief, but it's a good discussion, and I hope someone can take a little bit from this. You know, obviously the recordings that we've done,
yeah.
it's a good insight on people's perception, and a lot of perception, especially around men's health, is the same.
Mm,
It's that lack of understanding, or it's that lack of what's the word? Um,
exposure,
yeah,
experience.
exposure and understanding,
Mm,
especially when you're coming into the older generation. You know, a good friend of mine I was talking to, he's in his 80s and he's done a lot in Cairns for the community around the health sector,
yeah.
and he's lived in Cairns all his life pretty much. But he's at that age when he's encouraging people his age, encouraging them to get yourself checked out, whether that's physically or mentally. Go through your
Mm,
stuff. Early detection's the key. Having a network behind you. A good friend of mine who's down in Victoria. He's a police officer, and he's had people who have had that one job in their life, and they've been a cop all their life, and when they get out,
mm,
they don't know what to do with their life.
mm,
They're kind of being exposed to that for 50 odd years, and then once they've left, they go, well, what do I do? I'm lost. Having that resource to get with other people, whether that's a men's group or volunteering at your local bloody men's shed or whatever, to get
yeah.
some exposure to other people and have a chat and understand what other people are going through in their life, because those people could have been sheltered for whatever reason. I don't know the reasons, but
Mm,
the exposure that people have had or haven't had with men's health and mental health, there's a massive difference. So
mm,
it's just getting that exposure, it's getting that understanding of what you can do to better help your understanding of mental health. So hopefully we've had a bit of an insight this afternoon, mate. So I really do appreciate your time, Reggie.
oh, good.
It's a good insight, and I hope that everything works well with the bub. And
Yeah, of course.
I know Holly's going to send me some photos, and
Yeah, be pretty good starting time, eh?
yeah, it'll be good. And I'm kind of glad that I know when I had my boys, I wanted to know what I was going to have.
Mm,
I could not know. I needed to know, and I'm
mm.
glad I found out. So it's all good. All right, brother. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of
Yeah,
your
you
afternoon.
too.
All right. I
All
appreciate the
right.
conversation today, man.
All good.
All right. Thanks, mate. Take it easy.
All right. All right. Bye.